Cássio Moreira is the coordinator of Agriculture Environment Program for WWF in Brazil. He's been on a journey. He's been on a journey focusing on responsible soy. And a model that he's going to tell us about is the roundtable model for responsible soy. Tell us about the challenges and how they relate and how they might relate. Tell us about the economic sides of it. Tell us about the social sides of it. Tell us about the environmental sides of it and how they come together.
Okay.
Thank you, Cássio.
Good morning, all. It's a pleasure for us to be here. It's much better than we expected. I think all expectation that Brazilian players had. I think we all deserve a congratulation for that. So why should we talk about soy here? Well, there is a clear link between the soy and the beef industry, but what I would like to focus here is on the process that we had during this roundtable of responsible soy, the mistakes, the right decisions, a little bit about governance, and also I'm not going to enter so much into the contents, but I'm going to give one big of example of how to overcome challenge, and so that we can do it another way, on a better way here on the beef sector. So we run the program of agriculture in Brazil. We deal with beef, with soy, and sugarcane. I also try to run my coffee farm on weekends, but I haven't had so much time for that. I have my 20 cows to give manure to the organic coffee. So this is the roundtable of responsible soy. What is it? It's a multi-stakeholder initiative that brings together both the industry, the producers, and NGOs. I think what's important to highlight here is that balance interests from these distinct actors. We always, for instance, for WWF, we have a target, but sometimes we do not manage to reach that. We have to have 90% of that target. This is part of the negotiation. This is what a multi-stakeholder approach is all about. So when you think of the future of these initiatives, you must also be ready for that, how to negotiate. Sometimes you have to go to a decision that's not the ideal for you. So today we have 140 members from more than 20 countries, and WWF was one of the founding members. This initiative started in 2004, so we are already 6 years on that, but the difference with this initiative here is that the roundtable, since the beginning, there was a goal to turn into a certification. So I don't see this happening here today. Let's see how we go. So these are some of the members that we have. Some international important members. Others one, bank, NGOs, retailers, inputs, companies, small producers, large producers. And these are the members of the executive board. So our structure is different than the beef working group. We have only 3 chambers. So you can see that industry, banks, processors, retailers, they all sit in the industry chamber. Then you have the producers chamber and the NGOs. So I think it's important always to seek for a very balanced executive board. A little bit of the technical process, how RTRS has been dealing with this on the last 6 years. We established a way to work through working groups. So each working group always has to have members from the 3 constituencies, and always the process is in a democratic and open manner. There is a voting, and always one of the constituents has the power to veto the decisions. So that's why sometimes it takes a long time to reach agreement. One of the main working groups is the principle and criteria. I would say that's the heart of RTRS. That's what gives us credibility, and that's what deals with the environmental, social, and some economical issues. So this working group, they worked more than 2 years trying to identify what are the critical criteria for soy production all around the world. This group was composed by 18 people, 6 people from each constituency, and I think that this is the process that really legitimizes RTRS. Then we have the national technical groups, which are very important because they get this broad principle and criteria, and they adapt to each local reality, either to Brazil, to India, to Paraguay, to Argentina. And then other important working groups that we have worked on these last 4 years is the chain of custody, the traceability and claims. There is also a non-GM working group, the Renewable Directive on Biofuels, and the RTRS platform that helps how to trade RTRS soy. So just a little bit more about the process. In May 2009, we had the pilot field version approved in the General Assembly. So this was a draft criteria that was then taken to field level in 4 or 5 countries. These criteria were tested, were field tested, and then were further amended by the working group on principle and criteria. And now this June 2010, in our General Assembly, we approved the final principle and criteria, which, among other criteria, forbids the conversion of forests, among them the Amazon or the Atlantic or any forests. So we have basically 5 principles. Number 1 is related to legal compliance. Number 2 is related to labor condition. Number 3, responsible community relation. 4 is environmental responsibility. And number 5 is good agricultural practice. And we have 98 criteria distributed among these 5 principles. Other highlights that are interesting to tell you is that all the development of the criteria, they follow the ISIL standards. ISIL is a platform for certification quality, and all the methodology and the process was done in a neutral and inclusive standard. So it means that if you are an organic soy producer, if you are a non-GM soy producer, or if you are a fair trade soy producer, you can enter into RTRS. There's no discrimination. We want to aggregate most of the soy. One thing that's also interesting for RTRS is that soy is food, feed, and fuel. And through RTRS, you can reach all of these markets, being it for biofuel, for meat, or for soy meal, or for other. And it also involves small and big farmers. I think this was the biggest challenge that we had. It was about responsible expansion. As most of you know, soy and beef are the biggest drivers of deforestation in the South America and also in other countries. So this was one challenge that we had to build together. I don't know if we did on the right process. We are still working on that. It's an ongoing issue. But as you know, in Brazil and South America, we have still a lot of native vegetation. But there is also a pressure for expansion. So we need to find alternatives to help producers conserve biodiversity. This is one thing that we must, with the whole society, with the market, with the industry, with the NGOs, we must find good examples such as the ones showed yesterday here that are occurring in USA. And what we need for South America and for other countries, we need to develop a strong forest economy. So how we can gain more value from the wood so that producers do not need to convert their lands and they can get the same amount of money or even more with a strong forest economy. What we also need is better market for certified commodities. We also need payment for hidden costs, I would say, like carbon, biodiversity, and water. So sometimes the soy that arrives on the market, it's not only the soy, the protein, and the energy. There is the cost of conservation of water, the cost of conservation of biodiversity that is aggregated to the system of production. And we must find alternatives so that this value reach the producers. But on the other hand, producers also must be aware that deforestation is still the second biggest cause of greenhouse gases, and producers, mainly soy producers in the South America, are the most affected by the climate change. So we need to try to get an agreement through that. That's a picture of a Brazilian farm that I would like to highlight with you. This is on the Cerrado, in the Goiás Cerrado. I don't know if you know, but in Brazil we have a law that demands conservation, on-farm conservation. So this demand from on-farm conservation, it varies from 20 until 80% of conservation on farm. So if you are in the Cerrado, such as this one, you have to have from 25 to 35% of on-farm conservation. So this is a farm that is okay with the law. So it's also a farm that does integration of cattle and soy. It's very interesting, but it's difficult to find this same level of on-farm conservations on other producing countries. So imagine a producer that is in Amazon, he can only open 20% of their land. So we must find a solution for him to get money from the 80% of the forest that is standing there. That's an idea of how Brazil looks like. 72% of the open land is dedicated to pastures. So this gives an idea of the importance of the beef sector in the land use in Brazil. So beef is a key sector towards sustainability and towards increase of productivity, either of agriculture or of beef. And that's a little bit about soy. Going back to soy, how is the tendencies of expansion in South America? So today Brazil has around 22, 23 million of hectares with a tendency to reach 30 million hectares in 2020. This is mainly due to protein increased consumption in China and in India, and someone has to supply it. So, and what is interesting to highlight here is that the expansion in Brazil doesn't really happen in the Amazon. There is a pressure for deforestation in the Amazon, but the real expansion of soy and other agricultures occurs in our savanna, which is called the Cerrado. So we have the soy Amazon moratorium, which protects the Amazon, but doesn't protect the Cerrado. So we have to find alternatives to orient the expansion in the Cerrado on a responsible way. We're not saying it's a zero conversion of the Cerrado today, but we must develop tools to orient towards a responsible conversion, and then maybe we can have a zero conversion in 5 or in 10 years. So next one, how RTRS tackled this issue of responsible conversion? We had the pilot criteria approved in 2009. We evaluated this criteria. We received some critics from producers and from the sector, and then we further digged into the criteria and tried to consider these points that some producers highlighted. Because there was a restriction even for 1 hectare or 2 hectares or 5 hectares, producers could not convert this area if they did not do a biodiversity study that showed that that area was okay for conversion. And they also, Brazilian producers were saying, how can we be competitive doing this? We need to increase our area. And with this in mind, and with others, we managed to reach this criteria. This criteria is the criteria for responsible expansion. So we have a 2-phase approach. We have a long-term goal, which is to produce maps together with the sector, which will identify which are the priority areas which we should not enter, we should not convert, and which are the areas that are okay, that still is possible to do a responsible expansion. But in the short term, which means in the next 2 years, we offered the sector 3 possibilities. So if he is in a state that the law has this zoning, ecological economical zoning, the producer may expand according to the law, this law. Mato Grosso state, other states have been developing this. It's a very interesting tool and something that RTRS accepts. If the state does not have this ecological economical zoning, he can also expand according to the Convention on Biodiversity Maps. These also identify which are the priority areas for conservation and which are less priorities. And if the state or that the region has none of these maps, the farm has to do a study, a biodiversity study that identifies how to expand.